work. My name is Ray Siemens, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Digital Humanities 11. And I have a few things that I have the privilege of sharing with you in advance of all the good things that are about to come. One is to say, I think directly, honestly, it's really hard for me not to smile in this environment, just being here in beautiful surroundings, in such hospitable intellectual environs, made so by people that we really owe a debt of gratitude and absolutely must thank, even though they've done it with such finesse and grace that it's not looked that difficult at all. Anyone who's organized anything knows that that's especially the touch that we want. I want to thank Glen, Worthey, Matt, Jockers, sitting down over here, for all the hard work they've done for us. Well-deserved thanks, and thank you from me as well. They work with the local organizing committee, worthy of our gratitude, a team of colleagues, assistants, volunteers, and conference services, and I should add the very generous support of Michael Keller and the Stanford University Library. Michael, thank you. I'd also add it's hard not to smile in the good company of colleagues, friends, and as I look out, I see people who I hope will become new friends. From the three societies that form ADHO, the Alliance of Digital Humanities Organization, and beyond, and those three societies are the Association for Computers and the Humanities, the Association of Literary and Linguistic Computing, and the Society for Digital Humanities, Société pour l'étude des médias interactifs. And beyond this group, supported by groups like Ashgate, Alexander Street, the Bill Lane Center, excuse me, Gale, Hathi Trust, ProQuest, and Stanford University's Department of English, University Library, and Literary Lab. With several days of workshops behind us, and one more, plus those number of days ahead of us, stimulating talks and discussion ahead, we've got some great things to look forward to, especially, I would add, icing on a fantastic cake, really stimulating and exciting plenary speakers. David Rumsey, we'll hear in a moment, Chad Gaffield, Erz Lieberman-Aden, and Jean-Baptiste Michel, assembled for us, all told, by a fantastic program committee chaired by Kay Walter. And Kay, I saw you a moment ago, but we should thank you. Where are you? Wonderful. Thanks to you and everyone on the committee for all the hard and wonderful work you've done on our behalf. And all these good things, even a year where there's been sadness of loss this past year, of a foundational steward and shepherd of our community, Chuck Bush. Many of us know Chuck, knew Chuck, spent time with Chuck, and recognize all that he did for us. And I'd like to say Bethany Novisky. Bethany, are you able to wave? Bethany Novisky has a book of remembrance in which we can all jot down a few things if we like. Please find Bethany if you'd like to participate in that. Even so, it's hard not to smile as we proudly celebrate in this venue exceptional members of our community. Among them, Chad Gaffield, winner of the Zampoli Prize this year. Harold Short, as ALLC honorary lifelong member. Harold, you down there. And over the course of coming days, you can enjoy the work of those exceptional emerging scholars who are shortlisted for our Forche Student Prize. Among them, Alan Riddell, Dan Sondheim, Peter Organisiak, Scott Weingart, and Jenna Jorgensen. Comments about those exemplary new scholars and their papers go to Oyvind, who is our incoming chair of our ADHO Awards Committee. And if you'd like to know who Oyvind is, you can see him just down there. After you've seen papers, pass your comments on to him. As well as a fantastic group of bursary award winners who will be celebrated by us, for us, and with us by Tanya Clement. Tanya, you're out there somewhere, I know, but over there, celebrated at our banquet on Wednesday evening. It's hard not to feel good about all this as we consider to embrace the body of work that our society, our community, produces in the ADHO-sponsored journals like Literary and Linguistic Computing, like Digital Humanities Quarterly, like Digital Studies, Le Champ Numérique, and beyond, an ADHO-affiliated book series such as those with the University of Illinois Press, co-general edited by Susan Schreiber, who I saw a moment ago out there somewhere, and myself, publishing Steve Ramsey's new book this year, and also Ashgate, which has a book hot off the presses, which I understand we can see here, by Stan Rucker, Stefan Sinclair, and Milena Radzikowska. And indeed, continuing in this good positive trend, Harold Short, Marilyn Deegan, Lorna Hughes, and new to their team of editors, Andrew Prescott, have happily announced the renewal of the contract with Ashgate of their series, Digital Research in the Arts and Humanities. And do check in with Harold or Lorna Hughes, who I saw just a moment ago out there, or Daphne Evans, who joins us from Ashgate at the gathering, if you'd like to know more about exciting opportunities there. Even though I've missed a lot of accomplishment by members of our active, vibrant, and dynamic community, and I apologize for that. There's just so much going on at the moment, so many good things that we're involved in. It's been a year where we've seen overall considerable growth in what we do, growth in our community, and overall growth in understanding of the computational approach that our community brings to the traditional pursuits of the humanities, and at the same time expands those pursuits into valuable, exciting new areas. This is all done under the big tent, as some say, of digital humanities, inclusive and open as it is, and encouraging as it is of even more exciting new directions for our work. It's hard for me not to smile when I have the pleasure then of providing this welcome as ADHO Steering Committee Chair, to welcome you on behalf of all the communities of ADHO, on behalf of Julia Flanders of the Association for Computers and Humanities. Julia, right down there. On behalf of Lisa Lena Opasanen of ALLC. Lisa Lena, thank you. And on behalf of Dan O'Donnell and Michael Leveler Sinatra of Siddha Seni. Dan's up at the back there. Dan? So it's my pleasure to welcome you to Stanford for the 4th joint conference of these 3 societies in ADHO, the 6th, I believe, for ADHO as an organization of organizations, the 23rd of ACH and ALLC conjointly, reflecting a strong history of this community even before that. Welcome you to the appropriately styled, according to Matt and Glen, Summer of Digital Humanities Love that we'll all enjoy responsibly. Thanks to all who have made this possible. A hearty welcome to everyone joining us under this big tent, and I can't wait for what's to come. Thanks, guys.
We'll keep this brief. So welcome to the Silicon Valley and to Stanford and to DH 2011. We turned on the sun and cranked up the heat a little bit because we heard it was cold. I want you all to keep in mind as you're here that the Silicon Valley is known for flip-flop wearing executives and a generally laid-back vibe. So laid back, in fact, that earlier today I casually tweeted my cell phone number by accident. I've deputized all of our volunteers to walk around with scissors and cut off any neckties. But more seriously, I want to take a minute to acknowledge a special thanks to Melanie Walton, our conference services organizer. Melanie, could you wave, please? Thank you. And to our conference services team more generally, and to Stanford Catering as well. And I also want to thank Kim Hayworth, Elijah Meeks, and Joseph Couts, who all ensured that the workshops in Meyer went along swimmingly for the last couple of days. Could you all wave, please? Kim and Joseph and Elijah. Thank you. And I also want to give a special and personal thanks to the exemplary, very fine students of the Stanford Literary Lab who are wearing the yellow shirts in the back here today. Cameron and Catherine and Marissa and Irina and Long and Ryan. These are the people that you're going to want to be giving jobs in the next few years. And by the way, if during the lunch breaks you have an inkling to go up in the Hoover Tower and enjoy a spectacular view of the Silicon Valley, you can ask one of the yellow shirts to take you up there. It's a free pass if you've got one of them with you. I'd also like to make a couple of quick announcements. In your conference bag, you got a notification about the BUSA Award. which I'm chairing that committee this year, and I'm happy to report that I put it on Humanists yesterday and have already received the first nomination. I also want to mention the ACH mentoring program. If you have questions about that, please talk to me or to Stephen Sinclair. There will be an ACH-sponsored job slam during the AGM meeting at noon on Monday. Please contact Stefan if you have a job or you are looking for a job. And also I wanted to mention the ACH mentoring mixer, which will happen after the talk on Tuesday at 7:30, just across the street here at the Coho, the coffee house. That will take place. So let me now pass the torch here to my more groovy fourth generation Northern Californian co-host, Glen.
We welcome all you guests who are joining us just for tonight's event, and of course Matt and I are really proud and happy to welcome our digital humanities colleagues. There have been, are now, and will be many, many people tweeting this conference. Please use and follow the hashtag DH11 for this. We'll be recording tonight's lecture in an unusual and interesting way. Matt just got a tweet right here. I bet that's going to happen more before I finish, right? I'd like to reiterate Matt's advice to ask one of our fine students in a yellow shirt. There are a couple of staff members also wearing yellow shirts. These are people who know their stuff, not only their way around Stanford, but they know their DH stuff. So once you've had your help from them, please ask them about their research. They'll appreciate it and be happy to tell you. And it's a fine, fine group of people. It's a pleasure to be working with them. And for most of the conference, Matt and I will also be wearing yellow shirts. We're just two of the guys. So ask us as well for help. The reception immediately following David Rumsey's lecture is open to all, as I said. It's sponsored by Stanford's Bill Lane Center for the American West, along with a number of other Stanford digital humanities organizations on our campus. One of the collective purposes of sponsoring this reception is to showcase Stanford DH work that may or may not be in the main conference program. To that end, our colleague Elijah Meeks will have a running show. I think you probably saw some of it coming in. Please take some time to talk to Elijah. He'll be manning the show, and he'll be able to answer questions about it. He'll also be able to run I'm going to get this wrong, I'm sure, a personalized ego network of digital humanities connections for any of you who would like to see such a thing. You can see where you fit in the big picture. Elijah will show you. Now, it's my pleasure to, Mike already made fun of me for the string of introducing introducers, but I have to have a segue. It's my great, great pleasure to introduce my boss and Matt's boss, but more than that, a good friend, a treasured colleague, and an extraordinarily interested and engaged digital humanist himself, Mike Keller, Stanford University Librarian. Mike is going to officially welcome you to the conference because the Stanford University Libraries are the official host of the conference, so he'll give you his official welcome. As you'll see, he's much less official than us. He's not wearing a tie, and it's no surprise. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Glen. I want you all to settle in because I'm going to spend a few minutes up here. I've got the wonderful task of welcoming you to Stanford and the even more wonderful task of introducing David Rumsey to you all. See if I can see my paper here. The Digital Humanities Conference of 2011 is most welcome here at Leland Stanford Junior University. I used the whole title to introduce the notion that this university is typical of all universities in having multiple personalities. For instance, we call Stanford the farm because our founder raised racehorses here, having purchased the original Spanish land grant from the family that owned it. And then Leland Stanford commissioned Edward Muybridge, the English photographer, to use his pioneering photographic methods to determine how his horses move their legs at a gallop, foreshadowing, in this very strange way, the research mission of the university, which he founded long after. Obviously, from the title, we're a junior university. In fact, I think we're the only junior university I've ever heard of, for whatever that is worth. Our motto is a German translation of a Latin phrase by the 16th century Protestant humanist Ulrich von Hutten. The motto is Die Luft der Freiheit weht, which when translated into English means roughly, let the winds of freedom blow. Most apropos for this conference, I think. Glenn has mentioned, Matt has mentioned that we're in the heart of Silicon Valley. It's a bit of a problem, actually. We are hardly able to distinguish between ourselves in the center of this academic institution, this teaching and research institution, from the valley itself. The borders are quite permeable and sometimes invisible. We do know where there are big profits and where there are bankruptcies, and none of them are here at 94305. We are privileged in some ways to be part of a big university that's dominated by the sciences and the humanities. Privileged because we get some benefits from those disciplines that are useful to humanists. However, humanists, of which there must be 200 with professorial titles, have graduate programs that regularly rank very high in the various sweepstakes that are run to help people figure out who's first in English literature in America, for whatever reason. All of these and more, many more, begin to define the programs of teaching and research at this small, yet still striving institution on the banks of the San Francisco Creek here on the San Francisco Peninsula. Turning then to the subject of this conference, we have a long history of support in the digital humanities, and I'd like to rehearse just a few of the high points of that support, at least from my perspective. From the first volume of the Journal Computers and the Humanities back in the mid-60s until the last issue in 2004, over 250 articles in that journal cited research here or emanated from scholarship here. SPIRES, the Stanford Public Information Retrieval System, was derived in the 1970s from the physics system used for high-energy physics information diffusion. The SPIRES that I'm talking about became a general database management and analytical tool. Yet another derivative of SPIRES became BALLOTS, an early library management system that was ultimately taken up as the first operating system of the Research Libraries Information Network. It was only superseded a decade or so ago. A group of humanities scholars from Berkeley and Italy, including myself, used SPIRES in our research in the mid-1980s, trying to figure out how and what were the generative techniques in 16th century Italian lyric poetry. It was a remarkably ambitious research topic for the 10 of us, but we did a lot principally because of the SPIRES program, and although SPIRES has mainly disappeared, particularly from humanities research, I really regret that because it was a very flexible program. Malcolm Brown may be known to some of the older ones of you. He started here before going on to Dartmouth, and he and his team in the 1980s began digitizing by hand the works of Friedrich Nietzsche. That project has accumulated in the publication of the Nietzsche Complete Works by the Stanford University Press. Also in Malcolm's time, the Academic Tech Service here began, and it was principally a gatherer and presenter of digital texts for humanities research. That outfit became, over time, the Digital Humanities Information Service, which is led by Glen. And under Glen's leadership, it spread its wings over images as well as text in the doing of this, making good use of Luna Imaging's Insight software, which will arise when I introduce Dave Rumsey. In the mid-1990s, we experimented with a new sort of staff support for individual departments attempting to make uses of information technology in teaching and learning. The idea was to hire subject specialists with IT chops and interactive personalities to spend 80% of their time in a specified department and 20% of their time with the other information resource specialists resolving common IT issues. That IRS was an unfortunate acronym that was applied to these good folks, and we had to change it by reason of wanting to retain those good people. So they're now called ATS people, ATS meaning Academic Technology Specialists. The program is alive and well. Matt Jockers is a great example of the sort of person that works for us. He's going to talk to you, I know, about the CSER project during this conference, if he hasn't already done so. But I want you to know that this program and the work that Matt and others have done in support of the digital humanities here has been so successful that the Dean of the Humanities has given us some money as of a couple of years ago to hire an infrastructure person for the digital humanities. That person is Elijah Meeks. He's an extraordinary support person, and you'll be able to participate in his ego system. It's a wonderful term. I encourage you to talk with Elijah. He's a wonderful guy, and he's been so successful that there's been talk about cloning him. And I understand that some jokers are already talking to the medical school about doing exactly that. We can't afford to hire a second Elijah at the moment, so cloning him seems to be the next best deal. In 2002, we began with our colleagues at the Matthew Parker Library of Corpus Christi College, Cambridge, the digitization of the manuscripts in Parker's collection, ones from the 6th through the 16th century. Parker had made it impossible for people to come and visit the collection, or nearly impossible, by requiring in his will that Corpus do an annual audit of the manuscripts. And if that audit had shown that there were 3 manuscripts missing, the manuscript collection would go to the next college of 3. That would have been Trinity and Hall, I think, or Gaius and Gonville. Trinity and Hall, I think. The good fellows in 1576 of Corpus Christi decided that only they could see these manuscripts. No one from the outside could see them. And they never bothered to revisit that decision. My friend George Brown, sitting in the audience here, was treated to some of this dismal behavior long after the passage of that little law, but he was not permitted to go in and see the Bede manuscript that he needed to see. By 2002, however, they'd gotten the word, and we joined with them in a digitization project that resulted in the creation of digital avatars of these texts, and a few years ago we mounted these digital avatars with improved descriptions and bibliographies of secondary works that are associated with them on the web, and those manuscripts are now being much better used, at least for textual purposes, than they ever were before. All that was sponsored and supported by the Mellon Foundation and the Gladys Delmas Foundation, but we're delighted to have been involved. This project, the Parker Project, you can find it at parker.stanford.edu, used an approach that has become very interesting to the Mellon Foundation and to others, and we are now working on a new project to devise IT tools to permit interoperability for scholarship among the many silos of digital manuscripts that have arisen in the past decade. An article arising from that interoperability project has just won the first prize, the Vannevar Bush Prize, at the Joint Conference on Digital Libraries. Ben Albritton, a medievalist working on that project here at Stanford, was one of the authors of the article, the title of which is Shared Campus, a collaborative model for medieval manuscript layout dissemination. I think the prize was won in part because of its high relevance beyond medieval manuscripts. To quote John Hager, the project manager for Interop, quote, "Thinking broadly, despite our focus on medieval manuscripts, much of the payoff from our work may be realized in communities more concerned with other material types and with the structure of relationships among data of many kinds," close quote. Many of you know that we've been involved with the Google Book Project. We entered that project and we're still involved with it, in part to get all of the texts in our libraries in the digital form for analysis and study, as well as to be used in the form of a text base as a test bed for visualization applications, for new search engines, and for new modes of deriving meta-information from texts, from phrase size to corpus size. We believe that despite the judicial rejection of the amended settlement agreement a few months ago, we will be able to offer to Stanford scholars and students the text base coming from the books and other text genres in our libraries as a non-consumptive research corpus. Our goal is to permit and support the most avant-garde, leading-edge research that folks like you can imagine. There is, however, a long distance presently between the lip of that notion and the cup of the text. So to conclude my brief recital of our interest in and commitment to digital humanities, let me mention that there will be a workshop here focusing upon defining specifications and requirements for a multinational, multilingual, multi-character set of projects that will build RDF triples and provide them in open stores for all to use. Geeks from Stanford, the California Digital Library, the University of Michigan, Google itself, the University of Virginia, Emory, the Library of Congress, the National Institute for Informatics of Japan, the New Library of Alexandria, the Deutsche National Bibliothek, the Danish National Library, the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, the British Library, Oxford University, Aalto University in Finland, and the University of Southampton will all be participating by sending IT professionals. We expect colleagues from China and Spain to embrace our results when they're announced. We will issue a report soon after our workshop. We're intent upon building a global linked data environment for academic purposes, lots of them. This is the beginning of a big new program. The organization that I'm privileged to lead, the Stanford University Libraries and Academic Information Resources, including University Press and Highwire Press, is in part a collection of retreads. I'm one. A great many of our people are scholar librarians, subject and digital librarians, academic computing specialists with subject specialties, IT professionals who are dynamite project managers, and of course, like Matt, academic technology specialists with advanced degrees. You may call us mutts, you may call us hybrids, but neither of these terms begin to describe the intellectual and professional excitement, the productivity, the innovative mindsets, and the sense of stewardship of scholarship and teaching at Stanford that drive all of us. Just for a moment, I'd like all the people from Soulaire in this audience to stand up and turn around and face everybody else. Everybody stand up. These folks, joined by about, I would say, 550 others, really make a big difference here. I'm proud of them, the university's proud of them, and we're all happy to have you here. Are you Salim Mohammed? Yes. Welcome aboard, I haven't seen you. We grow. Okay, sit down, I gotta finish talking. The Bill Lane Center is taking a hand in supporting this. I want you to know that Bill Lane was a very dear friend of mine for many years. He's a fellow Bohemian. He was the publisher of Sunset Magazine. We did a book together. I miss him, but I'm proud that his name is on the center. I know that David Kennedy joins me in thanking Bill. Bill, thanks. So we're pleased to have you. I'm sorry about the heat. It's only going to get worse in the next few days. I'm happy that we can support you and join with others in supporting you. Your presentation and discourse are hugely important for the future of humanities scholarships in general. Enjoy one another and remember our motto, Die Luft der Freiheit weht, let the winds of freedom blow. Thank you. Now, task 2. Second 5 pages, all ready? It's most apropos that David Rumsey should provide the opening keynote to this conference. Let me tell you why in a great many words. You can start blushing now. There is an official biography of David Rumsey. I'm going to read it to you. But let me give you a few personal observations about David. First, he is, like many of us, a person with many interests, many talents, and much good sense. And like most of us, he is superlative in all these respects and many more. Dave Rumsey is an antiquarian, but one for his devotion to the rare and unusual originals in his personal collection of maps, atlases, gazetteers, and other geospatial printed works, is equally devoted to making them accessible via the net in digital form. and even more strikingly is intent upon demonstrating the new uses to which these digital forms might be put. David is also devoted to matters dear to my heart. He is concerned with the long-term future of our species and Mother Earth. He serves with me on the board of the Long Now Foundation in that pursuit. He is committed to the health and vibrant development of research libraries. David serves on the board of the Council on Library and Information Resources and on my visiting committee. He is an advocate for the use of digital images in the study and appreciation of art, serving on the board of the Crest Foundation. He has perfected with his own hands, his own equipment, and his own lab the digitization of his maps. David is an entrepreneur, moving and supporting Luna imaging over the years in response to opportunities and challenges that were and are meaningful to him, to art historians and art teachers, and to Luna's customers. David is a practicing environmentalist, running a big swath of high desert in Nevada as a self-sustaining agrarian enterprise. In all of these things, he is joined, supported, and cheered by his wonderful wife, Abby Smith Rumsey, herself worthy of much praise for similar devotion, sometimes overlapping, sometimes not. Now I read the official biography. David Rumsey is the president of Cartography Associates, a digital publishing company based in San Francisco, and he is chairman of Luna Imaging, a provider of enterprise software for online image collections. He was a founding member of Yale Research Associates in the Arts, a group of artists working with electronic technologies. He subsequently became associate director for the American Society for Eastern Arts in San Francisco. Later, he entered a 20-year career in real estate development and finance, during which he had a long association with Charles Feeney's General Atlantic Holding Company of New York, and served as president and director of several of its real estate subsidiaries. General Atlantic eventually became the Atlantic Philanthropies, a Bermuda-based philanthropic foundation that is one of the world's largest charities. The most secretive one, I might add. Rumsey retired from real estate in 1995 and founded Cartography Associates, beginning a third career as a digital publisher, online library builder, and software entrepreneur. Rumsey began building a collection of North and South American historical maps and related cartographic materials in 1980. His collection, with more than 150,000 maps, is one of the largest private map collections in the United States. In 1995, Rumsey began the task of making his collection public by building the online David Rumsey Historical Map Collection, www.davidrumsey.com. Currently, the online website has over 26,000 high-resolution images of maps from his collection. The site is free to the public and is updated monthly. Recently, Rumsey has been creating historical map projects both in Google Earth, Google Maps, in Google Earth, Google Maps, and the virtual world Second Life, where Map Darwin is his avatar. It doesn't look anything like him, by the way. In 2002, Rumsey was given an honors award from the Special Libraries Association for making his private map collection available to the public via the internet. In the same year, his map site won a Webby Award for technical achievement. The site has won numerous other web awards and has been featured in Wired magazine, MIT's Technology Review. MIT's a small school on the Charles River near Boston. Mercator's World magazine, the San Francisco Chronicle, New York Times, and on Tech TV. Rumsey has lectured widely regarding his online library work, including talks at the Library of Congress, the New York Public Library, the Digital Library Federation, Stanford University, Harvard University, WARE 2.0, OSCON, and at conferences in Hong Kong, Mexico, Japan, the United Kingdom, and Germany. Rumsey received his BA and his MFA from Yale, where he was a lecturer at art in the Yale Art School for several years. He serves on the board of the John Carter Brown Library, the Internet Archive, the Long Now Foundation, my visiting committee, Council on Library and Information Resources, the American Antiquarian Society, and is a trustee of the Yale Library Associates and the Samuel H. Kress Foundation. Rumsey has contributed to several publications on cartography and the advent of GIS. In 2005, Esri Press published Cartographica Extraordinaire, which he co-authored with Edith Punt. In 2009, David committed to donating his physical and digital map collection to Stanford University. Now, that's the end of the official. A few more words from me. David and Stanford, meaning Julie Sweetkind Singer, our Assistant Director of Geospatial, Cartographic, and Scientific Data and Services, as well as Head Librarian of our Branner Earth Sciences Library and Map Collections, joined by her boss and many others in our organization in programming, designing, and building a new map room, one equally adept at providing access to rare and common maps in physical forms as at displaying them for study and adaptation. We have vacated a pretty large room, hired some new staff, and are preparing ourselves in all ways for a high-tech, high-touch, high-innovation service based in part on David's map collection, but in truth on his own vision. The new Rumsey room will be equipped with large and small flat screens, touch screens, impressive computing power, and lots of display possibilities beyond screens. In addition, David has helped us pioneer in digital philanthropy, in which map collectors and dealers are letting us digitize their holdings for academic purposes. They retain their own holdings for their purposes. This is another remarkable Rumsey contribution. It's an innovation of an important sort, I think. It's been very productive for us in terms of developing warm relationships and, of course, in terms of adding to our considerable holdings in digital maps. David shares my view, I know, that the networked digital world presents us with remarkable new opportunities to understand, to teach, to analyze, to display, and to celebrate information resources of all formats and genres. Digital avatars of maps that permit layering, georectification, and comparison of exploration and development over the centuries is only the beginning. David will show you more. And for myself, the use of digital topographies, not at all related to any real topography, will lead us to more and better ways to understand our ever more complex and infinitely expanding information galaxy. I want you to forgive me for this long introduction, but David is an overly modest man, and he richly deserves immodest recognition. Please welcome Dave Rumsey to open this Digital Humanities Conference.
Thank you, Mike. I'm quite excited about my collection coming here to Stanford. I know we're going to have a lot of fun with it. And I'm also excited that Salim is here tonight. Good to see you, who will be shepherding the collection. And thank you for having me here this evening to give my talk, which will be about reading historical maps digitally, how spatial technologies can enable close, distant, and dynamic interpretations. But first, let me say, as I looked over the 400 plus pages of abstracts, quite a book, for this conference, I was pleased to see that your Big Tent digital humanities fields involve so much spatial and visual thinking. I used one of your tools. I did a simple text analysis of all the talk abstracts, not my usual activity. But it was so interesting to see the many uses of words relating to space, place, mapping, visualization, and graphing. As many words really as were used for digital and humanities. So I felt more at home coming here, given my lifelong obsession, as Mike has detailed, with maps and space. As digital humanities evolves, I think the old barriers separating text and image will begin to blur, which I think will be a good thing. Maps combine text and image as part of their essential structure. For example, this 1846 map of the mountains and rivers of the world done by S. Augustus Mitchell is quite extraordinary. It shows the highest mountains here all piled up on top of each other, and the longest rivers hanging down like snakes. In a visualization that's really remarkable for its simplicity and clarity. It includes text along the sides, and just at one view, says a whole lot about major parts of the world's topography. Because of this dual text-image aspects, maps really challenge us, I think, to understand them. Here are details from about 20 maps that show the many ways that maps work at visualizations. Maps are dense, complex information systems arranged spatially. While they share similarities with other visual artifacts, their uniqueness as spatially arranged visual information requires special digital approaches, I think, to understand and reuse their content. Georeferencing, vectorization, virtual reality, image database, and GIS-related tools all work to unite our eyes, minds, and computers in new ways that can make historical maps more valuable and accessible to humanists concerned with place and space over time. In this talk, I'll explore the tools and techniques that I use to work with maps that also may have implications for the ways digital humanists work with visual information generally. Using imaging technologies to help us unlock the information in historical maps is a big challenge because maps operate at multiple levels of meaning, from picturing so-called real space to visualization of natural and human data, historical events, cultural information like land ownership, political boundaries, conflicts, and much more. Maps incorporate elements of art through culture, science through measurement, and history through time. A map is a kind of proto-image and a super-narrative. It communicates both above and below the narrow bands of language and observation. Because maps are created as visualizations of information themselves, it's especially challenging to create additional digital visualizations of the maps. It's a bit like making a visualization on top of a visualization. So it may be helpful, I think, to use an idea from your world, the idea of readings, both of image and text, as an approach to sorting through the various ways that digital technologies can allow us to make close, distant, and dynamic readings through image databases, interface design, georeferencing, and GIS tools. Let's look at an overview of the various ways that this happens in my work. Here is a marvelous map of the Mississippi River from 1858 by Norman, published by Persac. It's one of the great antebellum maps that shows all of the land ownership patterns after the French along the river. With high resolution imagery, which is sort of the cornerstone of close reading of maps, we can zoom in and see this map in huge detail digitally. This is in the Luna database, which Mike mentioned. When the same map is georeferenced, that is brought into GIS, now we have the ability to compare it with other information layers. Here, the satellite view, the same part of the river, and also then to look at it obliquely and combine it with other data. Distant reading in an image database is enabled through viewing hundreds of thumbnails at once. Here in the Luna database, dynamic reading and distant reading in GIS happens when we join hundreds of maps together, as this project we're doing now of the German National Survey. Dynamic reading happens in virtual worlds, and virtual globes can be rendered in GIS. We can literally read a book with digital page turners. Tunnels of thumbnails in virtual worlds create 3D browsing. That's Mr. Darwin that Mike mentioned. And at the other end, we have serendipitous viewing with random thumbnails, globes, maps in globes, and here overlays of many maps at once. We have interface design is increasingly important as well, though. So here we have a new search by map interface that I've just launched that I will discuss. Also, we have an older interface that shows how you can search 4 maps at once, and then layerings of many kinds of information. Here, overlaying modern buildings with historical maps. And finally, vectorization which is our latest project and our most difficult, actually, where we extract information to put into databases directly from the maps. Here, the Norman Persack map that I showed earlier. These various techniques enable multiple readings of the maps. So we can do many things with these tools. But first, let's take a look back at how scholars like yourselves worked with maps long ago. And what kind of tools did they use? Well, one of the most interesting is the printed facsimile that was made by A.E. Nordenskjöld at the end of the 19th century. He published a facsimile atlas, which included a wide range of reproductions of maps from the 15th and 16th century using photolithography. Maps ranging from Ptolemy to the Librarian atlases to Mercator and Ortelius and Whitfleet. The reproductions make this an important work. They're not just illustrations to the text, but rather occupy full pages, in many cases full-size facsimiles, including the complete 1490 Rome Ptolemy, the world map of which is shown here in 27 sheets, with a remarkable composite image that shows all 27 sheets overlaid on the Ptolemy world map. This was very forward-looking and relates to a lot of the things that I'll show you. Then the Ulm Ptolemy of 1482, the Silvani Ptolemy of 1511, the Mercator world map of 1538, the Ortelius of 1570, and the Halkett from 1599. For the 1597 Whitfleet, there's a full page of composites showing North and South America assembled together. Again, very forward-looking. But this copy of the Nordenskjöld that's in my library is special for another reason. It was the personal copy of Henry Stevens. Mr. Stevens was a very prominent early 20th century map dealer, second generation, worked in London. And this copy has, as you can see here, Stevens' extensive manuscript notes as he compares 5 copies of the Librarian Atlas. Here are the copies with the abbreviations he's made for them. And here are his notes. So he's doing something that we routinely do now digitally, but we can see how he worked it through over 100 years ago. He made drawings along with his notes. He made visualizations of the maps, of how they differed, sort of visual annotations, even with the cartouches themselves. His small thumbnails of these map cartouches remind us of comparative works with digital thumbnails today. For many decades, this kind of photographic reproduction of the maps assisted analysis and dissemination, primarily in monographs and journal articles, but also as individual facsimiles. This method of republishing did not change the fundamental way the maps were read. With readers' eyes and minds, the maps were explored for their information, probing rich layers of data that the maps contained with their use of symbol, scale, font, color, dense graphic representation of information. But while this method expanded access to historical maps, it was still very limited compared to the near universal access that the internet has enabled in the last decade. If Stevens were alive today, I fancy that he would know how to use our new tools. He probably would have set up something like this on my site, a group of atlases by the American publisher Joseph Colton, 7 atlases from 1856 to 1886, with all pages and thumbnails for comparison, as you can see here, and also the ability to compare enlarged images, such as these showing changes in the Dakota Territory from 1857 to 1886, here enlarged to show the changes in the mapping of Lake Minnewacan, or Devil's Lake, over 30 years. Stevens and Nordenskjöld anticipated the power of image collections for mining the data, I think, in historical maps. Until recently, it's been primarily specialists in the history of cartography and map making that have been the primary users of both original historical maps and facsimiles like Nordenskjöld, because the barrier to entry was extremely high. The maps were scattered over many collections in many libraries in many countries. With the advent of the internet and advanced digital imaging technologies starting about 15 years ago, access now to tens of thousands of historical maps is possible through online map libraries, and gradually humanists in and outside the academy have been using historical maps in teaching, research, monographs, and articles, going well beyond the history of cartography into other areas of research. Over an 11-year period, we've seen requests for reproductions from my own online library go from about 1 a week to now more than 5 or 10 a day. Examples range from French environmental historians using this 24 gigabyte composite image of 18th century Cassini survey in France to measure the forest cover at the time, which is represented here by symbols on that map. Another example is Indian tribes in the U.S. using the many references we have in our General Land Office maps from the late 1870s and 80s showing the then very large Indian reservations to visually show the history of frequently broken U.S. treaty commitments. To Bethany Novisky's wonderful article on Francis Henshaw's map primer, which helped us to actually significantly improve our metadata based on Bethany's research. To experiments in computer reading of our maps by the hundreds being done by Peter Baichi and colleagues at the University of Illinois. With the growing interest and use of these historical maps, my responsibilities as an online digital librarian grow each year. My challenge is to increase access and to improve tools for analysis, understanding, and reading of the maps. We'll take a closer look at the various technologies I use and the readings made possible by them. Database and interface design for large map image libraries allows expanded access to many, many historical maps. These digital libraries are complex interactions of image compression, database visualization tools, faceted browsing, and more. Image libraries like my own, as you can see here, give the ability to view hundreds of maps quickly through visual browsing. We can quickly assemble groups of maps. Here, maps of North America arranged by date from 1756 to 1777. We can represent entire atlases, such as Henry Popple's Atlas of America from 1745, here with all the pages as separate images, and then as one giant composite image that allows us to zoom in through multiple levels of scale, a whole new way of seeing the maps and the book. As well, we've now added book readers to my site, where we can look at the book not just as information, but as an object in itself. See the versos of the pages, turn the pages, see how one page leads from another. We host this through the Internet Archive, but have incorporated into the Luna browser. This, I think, is going to be increasingly important, these kinds of book turners, as we incorporate more and more atlases into our collections. We can also zoom in, and we can do everything that we do with individual maps within the book. And on the left side, we have all the thumbnails of the book, so you can browse through and get a sense of the whole thing quickly as a group of pages, and then select any individual page and go immediately to it. We have just recently added to the site, after working for over a year with Peter Pridahl in Switzerland, who's a wonderful programmer, this search by map. And as you see, you have a Google map, and it's set to San Francisco with the results set on the right. You can click on any map that results, go into the Luna database, do the normal activities, panning and zooming, looking at metadata. What is great about this is it's very fluid. As you zoom out, all the results change on the right. They follow the coverage of the Google map that you're looking at. So it's a very fluid way. As we pan, we see maps of Central California. Then we zoom out, it changes to the state maps. All the maps, of course, in the database have to have coverage information. It's the MARC 034 field that we provide. We have about 12,000 maps out of the entire 27,000 online done, and we'll do the rest, we hope, over the summer. We can change scales, limit scales to 1 to 500,000, and then we can see groups of maps with smaller coverage within the same area. can also put in other limiters, like in this case Wheeler, keyword, and it brings up the Wheeler survey maps that fall within that window. This to me is a wonderful way to browse through and find content in the collection without ever entering a keyword, but just really looking at coverage. As we pan around and move out to America, we see maps of America. We pan out further to North America, and we get maps of the North American content. We have a timeline. You can limit your results by date. And there's also a find a place location that you can use. So we're very excited about this kind of tool. Again, it facilitates a kind of use of a large database. Discovery is very important in all these digital libraries. At the other end of the spectrum, we've long had something called the ticker. This has been up on my site for over 6 or 7 years. It's a random look at the whole collection in about 8 hours, exactly the opposite kind of experience. The maps float by. It feeds on serendipity, really. You find something that you're interested in. You get brief metadata. And then when you decide that there's a particular map that you want to look at, for example, like this map of Alaska, you click on it and it goes into the Luna database, and you can do the usual Luna operations. For those who really want to get obsessed with this tool, we will allow you no end of browsing. You can put up 5 or even 10 of these at once. And of course, that shortens the time it takes to see the whole collection, but it takes a little more looking. So this is a serendipity tool, really. So tools like this make possible extensive use of historical maps, and they open up the process of working with them. They allow distant readings of hundreds of maps at once through browsing, comparison, and searching, something that really is almost impossible in the physical library, along with the close reading of maps through zooming and panning that reveal details that would be very difficult to see in the original. And the ability, as I said, to create large composite images from maps that were published separately but intended to be joined. Using GIS tools with historical maps, of course, begins with georeferencing the originals. Here's the original map. Here it is georeferenced now in Google Earth. Georeferencing allows us to combine the map with many other kinds of information to overlay the map on top of satellite images, shapefiles, see changes over time. And when, as I'll show later, when there are maps as part of a series, it allows the creation of these huge carpets of maps at once. Here we look at San Francisco, 1859, by the Coast Survey, look at Mission Bay, see how it was filled in over a century. We can also look at it obliquely and turn on the 3D layer in Google Earth of the modern built city and see how that relates. A whole other kind of reading, adding the highways, looking at the tidal basins near Yerba Buena. We can see how much of the south of Market and impending Mission Bay development's been built on very shaky ground. We can also use digital elevation models here with the Wheeler map from 1883. The original map shows elevation through hachsuring, a wonderful 19th century technique. When we georeference it and combine it with a modern digital elevation model in this little animation, we can stretch the map and now see it in 3 dimensions. Going in the opposite direction with San Francisco Bay from 1925, we can use a bathymetric model. Here, we combine the bathymetric model with the San Francisco chart. Now we can see what we call its tin structure, which shows a whole new way of looking at this chart. When maps are georeferenced, they can also be put in our quad viewer, which allows looking at 4 maps, all different sizes, at the same scale, moving together, panning, zooming. As I said, large composite maps are a powerful use of GIS. I'll show 3 examples. The Cassini survey of France first, 182 sheets. The first really accurate survey of a country, all sheets done on the same scale. This is Paris, sheet number 1, of course. Here they are all joined. This is a 24 gigabyte image. Now we can see large parts of the country at different scales, something impossible with the originals. Moving in to look at the forest cover that I mentioned earlier. And here it is in Google Earth. Another example is Philippe Vandermeulen's marvelous 1827 Atlas of the World in 400 sheets, all on the same scale, the first lithographic atlas of the world, published in Brussels. We've done 2 continents so far. Here they are. They're all in the Luna database, but now we've georeferenced them. They're in a conic projection. You can see how they slant up. They're intended to be joined. He meant to build a globe, and he did actually in 1830, about a 30-foot diameter globe with all the sheets. So we recreate this. We've done South America as well. And then we have put them into a virtual globe. So Vandermeulen's atlas read by itself is extremely difficult to read because the sheets are all really disconnected from each other. In this kind of assembly and reading, you can now get a sense of his real purpose, what he intended to do, to put them all together and to show them as a globe. He also sold, interestingly enough, for 10 centimes blank sheets to use to fill in the oceans. I have yet to find those as a collector, but I'm still looking. In addition to this work with Vandermeulen, we're currently working on this huge and I think important Carte des Deutschenreich. It's a survey of Germany from the 1880s and 1890s. After German unification in the 1870s, they decided they needed a national survey. These maps are extraordinarily detailed. We scanned them at 800 pixels per inch. The eventual composite, part of which you see in the upper left here, will be 300,000 pixels by 300,000 pixels. The physical dimensions of the join map would be 35 feet by 35 feet. Here's the preliminary composite, just 326 sheets. Again, like the Cassini, as you zoom in, multiple levels of scale, marvelous cultural information in this map before the wars, going into Berlin. Here it is in Google Earth. And as good librarians, we also have a complete index in KML on top of it so that you can find any sheet, see what it is, download it, and so on. Here's a look at just a flyover of the Elbe River in Germany, flowing north here to Hamburg. And as we move over it, you get a sense of just the richness of information and the ability to join all these maps and to look at them as one really is a transcending thing with this kind of resource, I think. We're going by Hamburg. We can see the density of the urban town. And then as we move, you see the railroads that are coming in, the beginning of tidal action indicated on the map. As we move to the estuary where it opens out into the sea. Just to look at the quality of the survey that they did was extraordinary. We had to find a special datum that I had to invent, but once we found it, everything in the survey went ka-chunk. Incredibly accurate across all 674 sheets, just looking slowly at the modern satellite view, see the roads align. Of course, there's so many things that are new, but this kind of alignment gives you amazing ability to just do visual studies of this with your eyes, much less what I'll show you in a minute, the vectorization that we intend to do with this as well. Different editions of historical maps, when they're georeferenced, can also be closely compared in a way that is impossible in the physical library. This is John Mellish's 1823 map of the United States, the first map to show the country from coast to coast. Here's his 1816 earlier edition by 7 years. They're both georeferenced. If we go into the upper Missouri River Valley and see the black hills that appear from the long survey on the 1823 Mellish, now as we fade back into the 1816, you can see how they had no idea of this topography. The river has moved incorrectly west in the older version. So this kind of precise overlay is very powerful, very interesting reading that can be done. Digitization of features, either by hand or various automatic vectorizing programs or by combinations of both, enable powerful analysis of maps that have been georeferenced and put into GIS. And they allow combining various shapefiles and other information layers that result into other databases and visualization. It allows us literally to lift data off the map and put it into database. The Stanford Spatial History Lab, with Zephyr Frank, Richard White has done some impressive work in this process, and they actually encouraged me to move in this direction. Here are some examples of very preliminary work we're doing with automatic vectorizing programs, taking this Bartholomew map of Switzerland from 1922, putting it into R2V, which is a pixel-based vectorizing program. It automatically creates database information on the names, the rivers, the water bodies. Here's the same program applied to the German map series that I mentioned. Incredibly dense information. It picks up all the lines, points, and polygons. Here you can see it a little better if we remove the map. Again, it's very early in this work. There's a huge amount of handwork that has to be done with this, but we're quite excited about it. Another program is called eCognition. This we just started working with. This is, instead of being pixel-based, it's object-based. So this is how it analyzes the map. So I'm very hopeful about this kind of work. What will it mean for us to be able to OCR historical maps, the way you do text, the way Mike talked about text mining? It will enable the creation of databases of names, locations of all towns, all buildings, natural features, roads, contour lines, rivers, and more. But it's going to be much harder because the maps are already a complex system. All image overlays each other many times. So we have to teach our computers to read as effectively as our eyes and minds do. But I think the payoff is huge. My feeling it will have more to do with the kind of work that Peter Bakshi's doing, pattern recognition, image recognition. I think it's obvious what humanists would do with this information. It opens up a whole new archive of data that might not exist at all in other places and forms. Then we'll be able to mine this vast trove of data with spatial and temporal aspects and find new patterns of history, both human and natural. For instance, here's the legend for the Carte des Deutschenreich series I mentioned. Just a few of the things that it has: churches, chapels, monuments, windmills, watermills, factories, brickworks, powder magazines, many other important buildings, 4 different qualities of roads, plus bridle paths, footpaths, railroads, vegetation minutely classified according to separate symbols for broadleaf trees, evergreens, underbrush, heathers, dry meadows, wet meadows, swamps, orchards, gardens, vineyards, and even parks. So you can imagine what environmental historians could do with this. In addition to close and distant reading of historical maps, I think there's something else that I call dynamic reading, for lack of a better word. It includes visualizations that don't neatly fit into other approaches. But generally it means a fluid and changing presentation of maps digitally that combines both close and distant readings. One of our first steps into this direction was the turning 3D map here of Yosemite Valley, which we did 10 years ago. I'm proud to say it still works on our site. It uses a browser plugin and wireframes from GIS. It allows you to see this. This was long before Google Earth existed, but it gave a sense of the three-dimensionality of the object when combined with a digital elevation model. Another thing we've been doing lately is, instead of just two-dimensional overlays of historical maps, here a series of 4 maps of New York City, from 1836 up to 1867, we started playing with overlays that are stacked up in space, spatially separated from each other. And getting interesting, it's more of a thinking tool, really, than a research tool, but we're quite interested in it. Another foray we've made is into digital globes. We did this quite a while ago by reprojecting here globe gores from Cassini's 1790 wonderful world globe that he made in Rome. Here, putting it into UTM projection, then unprojected in WGS 84, and then finally putting it in ESRI's ARC globe. This was the first one we made. We were quite excited about it. It can be combined with other digital layers here, the world at night from NASA. Recently, we've been working also with celestial globes. Here, the companion globe done 2 years later by Cassini from 1792. Here it is, 64 million meters outside of his terrestrial globe in Google Earth. A whole other kind of view. We started working in virtual worlds about 2 or 3 years ago, initially in Second Life, but we're now going to be moving into OpenSIMS platforms, which I'll say a little about. And that opens up a whole other set of possibilities. We have 4 Sims in Second Life. This is my avatar, Map Darwin, flying over the Yosemite Valley map that you saw earlier. We use GIS to bring this into Second Life. The globes are 100 meters tall. Scale is really based on the scale of the avatar here, 2 meters. You can fly inside, see the inside of this globe, where we wrapped the whole GIS around in reverse. In addition, we've been able to use the scale, it's 512 meters by 512 meters, to display very large maps. In this case, this 20-foot scroll of the Tokaido Road that I host for the East Asian Library at Berkeley, it's a marvelous map. It shows the route from Edo to Osaka, done in 1687. Here it is now. In Luna, we have to divide it up. Here, we can, in Second Life, we can lay it out. And it's a bit of a pun, but my avatar walks the road and experiences this map in a whole new way. Another example is this 600 meter tall tower of thumbnails that we built. This was part of my desire after working so many years with flat thumbnail screens in Luna, and it's the art store. It's the common way we look at thumbnails. I wanted to see what it was like to arrange them architecturally and to move through them in 3 dimensions. Again, more of a thinking machine than an actually practical tool, but I've spent hours in here thinking about it, and to me, it points to things. It is done with pretty high-resolution imagery. This is what you see when you put your avatar's nose up to it. It also connects out to our Luna database for high-resolution imagery when you click on any of the thumbnails, metadata, and so on. Certainly, this kind of immersion into the maps at a relatively large scale produces different readings, but I think it's too soon to tell just how useful it will be in the long run. When we have more control through our own open source platform, which is shown here at the very beginning, this just started a week ago, I think we'll be able to get more exciting results. This is my developer, Jason, looking a little forlorn. He's got exactly 2 blocks built. He's got a long way to go. But we will port the entire thing from Second Life to OpenSIMS. We'll have 16 SIMs instead of 4. We will have complete control of avatars, entry, exit, and so on. We can also easily connect to our multiple other databases, which is very exciting. So I think this is a direction we're going into. Going in a completely different direction, going back in time 500 years really. This map I think is interesting as I get to conclude here. It was made 500 years ago and reissued by Antonio Garcia Cubas in his Atlas of Mexico, 1858. It's titled The Peregrination of the Aztec Tribes. GIS as a tool cannot do much with this map because the map does not operate in real space. Rather, it creates its own spatial system. Yet the map uses GIS concepts of network and timeline as it creates a visualization of a narrative. The travels of the Aztecs over a 350-year period as they moved from their ancient home of Atlan, shown in the upper right, blue square, finally settling in present-day Mexico City, shown by the blue cross in the lower left. Each occurrence of the plant symbols along the footpath marks one Aztec cycle, about 52 years. They began their journey at the end of the 9th century and finished in about 1325. The map shows that spatial concepts and constructions exist independent of the tools we use at any point in time. And as such, I hope that some of the goals and purposes of the readings that I've been showing may have relevance to analysis of other kinds of visual information beyond maps alone. I think the makers of these historical maps long ago certainly would have not envisioned the many new ways that we can reconfigure and reuse them, although I expect that they would approve. New technologies make possible new readings of maps. Close or traditional readings are made even richer. Distant readings, or the ability to analyze the content of many maps at once, are just beginning to be possible and hold much promise in the future as map OCR improves. And combinations of both close and distant readings can create dynamic ways of understanding, exploring, and learning from the maps. For my own work, some of the challenges ahead are in feature and pattern recognition of the maps, the OCR challenge that I mentioned, OpenSIMs for more control of the virtual space, migrating the GIS to web mapping services, WMS formats that can be used by more people, and getting more involved in crowdsourcing of GIS. I'm hopeful that some of you will have suggestions for us regarding these areas. Now with these historical maps together, we can see the whole Earth represented, not only through satellite images, but through historical imagery that reveals how we view our world and our place in the world from earliest times to the present day. Now with our digital tools, we see historical maps as a coherent body of knowledge about the world and its past. Like the millions of texts being read anew digitally that reveal to us otherwise hidden patterns of human thought, historical maps digitally enabled are revealing spatial and temporal context of human activities of generations past and present that we have never before seen. Thank you very much. We have time for a few questions. I can try. Yes.
This avatar walking over a map in Second Life made me wonder, what happens when you reproduce a facsimile of a map in Second Life? Do the map become the landscape? Or is it the landscape becoming the map? Or is it something different?
Good question. And not obvious. You know, there's the technical aspect of bringing it into Second Life, which is quite primitive, really. And because we like high resolution and require it, really, you have the largest block is 1024 by 1024. So you can imagine those globes are made of hundreds of blocks. So I think it becomes the landscape. One of the big disappointments in Second Life is that the giant trims we use to build the Yosemite have to be transparent. They won't hold, when you walk on them in your avatar, you fall through. So I think they lose the whole aspect of being able to walk up and down. In open sims, we won't have that limitation, so I'm quite excited about it. But I think the whole point is to exactly provoke that kind of question when you're there. Am I in the map? Is the map the landscape? Is it the information? I mean, the obvious pedagogical uses that have been made, people teach on those maps, that's very straightforward. But the whole idea of, as a thinking machine, I'm hopeful our new effort in open sims will be even more powerful. Yes.
I think almost all of the maps you show, not all, are historical maps. That is, they're maps depicting conception of reality at the time when they're making. There's another category of maps that represent historical knowledge at the time of the making. Is that a special category in the collection, or special considerations? Is that something you know?
Would you refer to historical maps as a genre? Maps showing history?
Maps depicting history?
Yes. I love those, and we have quite a few of those in the collection. I didn't show them tonight. It was a very popular form of Germany in the mid to late 19th century. There's also a whole area of timeline, which Photographer has written very interesting. But I am interested in those. I didn't show them. Those are visualizations of history. Perhaps that's why they function.
I wondered if you'd given any special consideration to digitization of that.
Well, we put them online. We have several hundred of them, but just beyond that, it's a good question. I think they deserve some look. What you could do, certainly they'd be a good source of vectorization because they deal with quantum, they deal with methods. Yes.
The collection of French maps. What was the date on those?
1750, the survey began. 1750 to 1818.
I was kind of hoping it would say 16th century because I'm looking for some very accurate, a very accurate map of 16th century France with the towns represented.
Yeah, my collecting interest really started at about 1700. As a collector, you have to put one.
Sure.
Likenesses. So, we love everything. So I was interested in the rise of modern cartographic design.
Right.
1700 is incredibly arbitrary date.
But I was very excited by what I saw because it definitely has, it's very much closer than what I had. And I've been geocoding the towns that I get from the original 16th century text. And it's very difficult to get the right names. So maybe the 17th century map would be closer to what I'm looking for.
Yes, names have changed. All the more reason to do vectorization to create these historical gazetteers.
Right, well that's what we're doing too.
And that you're probably doing, yeah. Good.
Thank you.
One in the back.
In the back, yeah.
Can you tell us something about imaginary maps in your collection?
The closest we would get would be timelines. The work of Emma Willard, although I know where you're going. Imaginary map, by that you mean an artistic rendering of a space that doesn't really exist.
That's like paradise?
Well, you saw the one, that was the Quinn historical series, which shows Eden as that little hole in the cloud. But imaginary maps are a fantastic area. It awaits me as a collector. I would love to get more into it. I have a painter friend from my art school days, Michael Moore, who does imaginary topographical drawings of the American West, which are quite fantastic. They're places that don't exist. They have all the aspects, desert and mountain. It's a very interesting area.
Let's have one more question before we let David rest. David, your choice. We have it right here in front of us.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. This is great, and your site does a whole lot of really cool stuff. I'm wondering if you can say a little bit about what kinds of user studies you do, like how you decide what you're going to do next, and how you decide what you're doing is doing it in the right way for people to use.
Yeah, we get, well, my work with Glen Imaging, we've done many user studies over the years. And what's interesting about that is a user study 5 years ago is useless. People's patterns change so much because it's not just influenced by some innate human thing, it's all the other software that's out there. It becomes a vernacular. So with Google Maps, when it came, it defined the whole way of approaching, zooming, panning, and so on. So it's a mix of listening to what people are saying about your software, but also looking at all other softwares that are out there. So we get a lot of anecdotal feedback all the time. And we redesigned my site a year ago to make that even easier. But it's a constant, fluid kind of activity. There is never a set moment in any of these software. Constant change. The whole area of access by Google is quite interesting and fraught, really, for the academic world. Great admiration for Google, partnership with Stanford. As a search engine, they're now teetering under the weight of so much stuff that they've had to do these what they call the panda updates. And they're in the midst right now. In fact, I've been tracking it for a week. They're doing Panda 2.2, which they're forever trying to get rid of the bad stuff that they define as the scraping that's going on. But because I'm so aggressive with my digital donation of my stuff, I give it out to everyone. So my images appear in millions of places all over the world. So it looks like I'm a scraper of my own material. And so we had to redesign a little software with canonical URL. And this is a whole thing that library sites are going to have to get into if you want to work with Google, and Google's going to. So user studies are really important, but just keeping up with the changing environment. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.